Chairman, and I'm with the Tennessee Valley Authority's Economic Development Group, and I will be your moderator for today's panel discussion. So during this time, I'll be asking questions to three outstanding consultants that have the today. So given our short amount of time that we have together, take this brief moment to introduce our consultants. So today we have Greg Burkhart, who is Managing Director and Practice Leader for Site Selection and Incentive Advisory Services for Duff & Phelps. He has 25 years supporting economic development projects, located approximately 90 projects in the southeastern United States. He specializes in supporting all industry sectors in manufacturing, distribution, R&D, and HQs. Next, we have Blair Westmoreland, and she is a Senior Manager with Deloitte. Blair has been supporting economic development projects for almost 15 years, 7 years in the Georgia Department of Economic Development in various roles. And she has been with Deloitte Credits and Incentives Group for 7.5 years. And next we have Joe Palski, President of Palski & Associates, which was founded in March 2013. Joe has 35 years of economic development experience, 9 years in the public sector and 26 years in the private sector. He's worked with various organizations such as the City of Chicago, Arthur Andersen, Ernst & Young, and Duff & Phelps. And he also supports all industry sectors in manufacturing as well. So thank you, panelists, for taking time to meet with us today. And without further ado, let's go ahead and begin our session. So question one, Joe and Blair, as advanced manufacturing companies continue to accelerate their investment in talent and automation equipment to drive future production efficiencies, how are you seeing your clients approach these two factors in their site selection decisions now? And Blair, can you follow up your perspective on how the future use of incentives could be used by advanced manufacturing companies to support these two factors?
Yeah, absolutely, Chris. Thanks everybody for having me. One of the definitely the things we're hearing about is, advanced manufacturing and automation and what that means for our clients and states and communities, especially around job creation and job growth. We are seeing automation happening in a lot of our advanced manufacturing plants. One of the key areas that it has been a little bit challenging is, the automation is creating a new demand for a higher skilled worker with additional background and talents. That is proving to be a little bit of a challenge when it comes to identifying those specific skills. We've been having to dive in deeper with some labor analysis, labor studies, asking a lot from communities and states to really provide additional information like the demand for specific job classifications, especially in the engineering fields. We're not only looking for the number of jobs and job classifications that are currently looking for work in a current location, but we're asking for communities and states to help predict what that demand could look like, because that's driving a lot of where a lot of my clients are looking to locate. Is they want to see that demand pipeline on a steady increase versus seeing a decline in specific job classification and skill sets.
Joe, what are your thoughts?
I was just going to add to what, my thoughts are that probably the best indicator is, I can remember back 20 years ago plus when I started working on this, when a client would have a $20 million capital investment, along with that, you could almost automatically assume it would be 50 to 100 new jobs. Today, what I'm seeing with my client base is that capital labor ratio has increased tremendously. So we see now clients looking to invest, $40 to $60 million in manufacturing plants, and they may have no job increases, or they may have 10 or 15 job increases, depending on how the market accepts perhaps some new product ideas. But there's a huge increase. And, one of the challenges, in addition to what Blair mentioned, is, there might be a situation where a particular location logistically works, but they just don't have the talent, or what they need to look at more is how do you develop the talent. And so increasingly what we're seeing are communities that win investments are those with really innovative community college or technical school training programs that can be customized. Oftentimes they're very customized to specific subsections of industries, might be plastics or steel or some type of machinery in order to lure clients. We've also seen some innovative ideas where, in addition to have on-site training, various community colleges have come up with mobile training centers where they bring them to the site, wherever that site might be, so that when companies getting ready to open, they're there training people on site even before they're operational. So Blair is spot on in that talent becomes even more important when the capital labor ratio has increased as much as it has in the last 20 years.
Yeah, and Joe, and to exactly what you said, my clients are hiring employees a lot earlier, as far as 3 and 6 months before the facilities even plan to be operational. And they're actually taking those employees to existing locations and training them on the specific machinery and equipment. And so, some of the incentives that are really able to offset some of those costs are the states and the communities that are stepping up and allowing some of those training dollars and training grants to be used in that manner versus just, strapping the company to use, in-state training programs, because the companies are wanting to start this training process so much earlier now than I've seen in the past.
Right. And in addition to that, what we've seen local communities do is to develop apprenticeship programs. This is something we talked about in my lunch table, is that, developing really a manufacturing culture in an area by having high school apprenticeship programs. Manufacturers love to see that. They love to see communities that embrace manufacturing as a great career, which it is. And so I think, a number of my winning locations have been places where there's high school apprenticeship programs.
Absolutely.
So Joe, do you see that as a trend in the future as an increase in apprenticeship programs? Is that something that's going to be trending?
Absolutely. I think, what keeps most plant managers up at night when they're opening a new facility is, recruitment initially. And then the second thing that keeps them up at night is when people leave, how do I replace them? So it's recruitment secondarily. So yeah, I think apprenticeship programs helps to reduce that. It doesn't eliminate it, but it helps to reduce that concern.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks, Blair. So moving on really to question 2, Greg and Joe, will reshoring continue? And if so, are there any new elements that advanced manufacturing companies should consider under a Biden administration?
I don't know. Greg, are you still on? I'm not seeing him on my screen. Okay, I think I'll start with Greg, and hopefully Greg can join. The short answer I have for that is absolutely. In fact, reshoring, started, I think, well before the tariffs hit. There was a lot of talk about reshoring, and I'm sure Blair has seen it in her client base as well. And reshoring isn't always just closing down foreign operations and moving them domestically. It can also be making differential investment, where a company was all overseas manufacturing, let's say a US-based company, and they're doing differential investment, but choosing to do it domestically because there's a variety of reasons why that makes sense. Logistics, obviously, it's quality control and speed to innovation. Talent, as we just touched on. So there's, and then there's, I hate to admit it, but it's true, is national security. now more than ever, and protection of intellectual property. So I think reshoring, for a variety of reasons, in addition to tariffs, will be with us for quite a while.
Yeah, and Chris, you had mentioned, what are we hearing about the new Biden administration? And he has, Deloitte has put together a document kind of outlining what to expect in taxation changes. And one of the areas that is highlighted is that Biden is calling for an offshoring tax penalty. So companies that choose to offshore would be, the tax penalty is a 10% surtax on top of his proposed corporate increase rate from 21 to 28%. But then he's also creating some different incentives, or looking to create some different incentives to, one is a Made in America credit, which is a 10% credit, and my child's crying in the background, a 10% credit that would be applied in several qualifying areas, mainly around talent and supporting talent and training and workforce. So that's two of the areas that are specific to reshoring some offshoring manufacturing currently.
And what I would add to
So,
that,
Blair, go ahead.
I'm sorry, go ahead. Chris, you had a follow-up question.
Oh, no, go ahead, Joe. I was just going to follow up with something again on reshoring, but go ahead, Joe.
I was going to build on this concept of sort of Made in America, in that there are some states, I know Illinois is one of them, perhaps there's others as well, that are looking at this concept and bringing it home to the state level and saying, putting some requirements certainly on public projects, but also on non-public projects, construction and otherwise, saying that X% of the materials need to come from, let's say, Illinois manufacturers. That could lead to a whole cascade of interstate competition, and could also lead to some movements. Just pointing out to Illinois for a moment, maybe into Illinois, maybe out of Illinois. It's too early to tell how that will all play out, but that concept is being talked about, and there's some legislation drafted in at least one state to take what's a national concept and bring it to the state level.
Interesting. So, I guess Joe and Blair, touched on this subject of reshoring, because I think we're all trying to forecast what, the first quarter may start looking like, once this Biden administration starts taking hold. So my thing is, what kind of target industries are you guys seeing in terms of what communities and states should be really focused on in terms of looking at, there's been a lot of talk about pharma. There's been a lot of talk about, those type of industries coming back, life sciences coming back from overseas. Are there any other specific target industries that are really getting looked at right now really closely, either by Deloitte or Joe, your firm, about what kind of target industries should be focused on for first quarter?
Blair, you want to take a shot at that?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many areas of advanced manufacturing. We're also seeing a lot of food processing projects happening, mainly. It's funny, there's a lot of the projects around, the HelloFresh industries, any sort of delivery food service or any food industry service that helps support that delivery, those delivery programs. We're seeing a lot of activity around those. Advanced manufacturing just continues to be strong. You're either producing something that is in great demand, and unfortunately there's a lot of companies that we've seen a lot of projects go on hold that were producing something that's been terminally hit during the COVID activities. And I wish we didn't lose Greg, because I know Greg was going to talk about the automotive industry, because he is I think we're getting Greg back. Did we get him back? sorta.
I think Greg's working on it. He may still be.
Sorry about that. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
I was. Hey,
we got you.
I was leading into your automotive introduction, so it was perfect timing. Oh no, we lost him.
We lost him.
We lost him.
Well, I was
Okay.
just going to add to what Blair was saying while Greg sort of gets back online here, that what I'm seeing is I've had clients in the electric circuits industry that have fully closed their Asian operations and moved them back to the States, and that was driven by a need to innovate and manufacture as quickly as possible. Others that I've seen, they had very patents really drive their business and their margins, and they were burned a couple of times in the past 20 years overseas, and so they've made their differential investment domestically, where they could rely upon U.S. law to protect their intellectual property, and the other, and that was more in a chemical industry, and then the last in building materials that are patent protected as well. Construction industry, investment. There's a lot of construction industry movement here still in the States despite the pandemic. And so a number of my clients have maintained foreign operations, but differentially, they're building their patented products that may provide an energy component specifically here in the States.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think Greg is hopefully back online with us.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes. Got you.
It's a good thing I didn't pull a Jeffrey Toobin while.
Greg, we're glad to have you back. We were just having some discussion, and just to go ahead and dive into the topic. We were having some discussion here on reshoring, really, and obviously it's been a hot topic here over the last couple of months over this COVID period. But Greg, while we got you here, can you just give us a few thoughts on what do you think is this reshoring going to continue to be a trend, and maybe what things you're seeing in your side of the table?
Sure. With respect to reshoring, we just actually had a firm-wide call this morning about this particular topic, and Duff and Phelps actually has two free resources I'll tell people about. One is what we're calling a Kroll COVID heat map, and it's a global heat map that shows kind of how the pandemic has been spreading across the globe. And then it also shows, if you click on a country, it'll show you the effect that the pandemic has on individual industries. And it's real time. It's updated once a day, 7 days a week, and it's updated by some of our local folks in country. And what you might see, for example, if you click on leisure and hospitality industry in the United States, you'll see that the entire industry segment has just been absolutely decimated. But you can click on transportation sector and see how things state by state have been affected by COVID. So that's one free resource I'll offer up to people. Second free resource is a reshoring benchmark. We created an index and we updated the old tipping point industries that the Boston Consulting Group did a couple of years ago. And what we did is in addition to cost, we actually factored in risk. And so to the question, I think, Chris, that you were asking, I think maybe in the Biden administration, we don't quite know what's going to happen with China trade policy. However, we still know that the pandemic is going to be around, and actually we might be in the second wave of the pandemic. So risk is definitely going to be a part of the equation for reshoring. And so our analysis shows that the reshoring trend is going to continue, but it's mainly going to continue due to supplier disruptions. We're going to see OEMs want their supply base closer to the market and bring it closer to the United States. Now, in the Biden administration, is that going to be a U.S. focused reshoring, or could it also include a nearshoring opportunity in Mexico? I think that's still yet to play out. but we still see reshoring happening. The risk component of the equation is going to change a little bit, but we still see the pandemic disrupting the supply chains.
Well, Greg, you mentioned a little bit there. You touched a little bit about the automotive industry, and we're going through a lot of change right now in the automotive industry. With looking at these new EV platforms that all of our OEMs are looking at, and virtually most of them have announced some sort of an EV platform. How do you see right now the take like the new USMCA that's basically replacing basically the old NAFTA program potentially. How do you see in the big picture globally with automotive and then this move and this big shift to EV? Do you see the USMCA kind of being a catalyst with this market, or what are you kind of seeing out of and in general, just what are you seeing out of the USMCA dialogue that's being had right now? In terms of impacting incentives and impacting site selection. Are we going to have more influx of Canada and Mexico as participants with our domestic manufacturers here in the U.S.? So what's your thoughts on that, Greg?
Well, Chris, there's a labor provision in the USMCA that specifically affects the auto industry, and it essentially equates the labor rate in Mexico to $16 an hour. And so if the Mexican labor is not paying at least $16 an hour, then there's going to be a tariff imposed to actually bring that up to equilibrium with U.S. rates. So, from that perspective, the USMCA is really kind of taking labor out of the equation, quite candidly. And so now, when you're taking a look at labor, what you're really analyzing is the skill component. And so what we see are higher skilled occupations or requirements. Some of that is going to be coming back to the United States. And then when you also continue to factor in risk, I mean, there's a certain amount, for example, in Canada, there's a 14-day quarantine to go across the border in Canada. So there's still going to be disruptions in the supply chain, even for nearshoring. Not as long of quarantine, but there's some different dynamics happening in Mexico on top of the pandemic, with the violence that's happening in Mexico. So given the continued risk profiles that we see in Mexico, the pandemic overlay that we see in both of our neighboring countries, I think it bodes well. The USMCA actually bodes well for continued investment in the United States. Now, you mentioned EVs, and what we're seeing on EVs, here, especially down in the South, the overseas OEMs have global programs in Greenville, Spartanburg, in Chattanooga, and in Vance. So the product that they're producing there is being made not just for the United States, but it's being made to be exported to Canada, not to Canada, to China, and back to Europe and into Latin America. And so, as the pandemic kind of flows through the globe, what will end up happening is, while things may be hot here in the United States, it's largely dissipated in China. So vehicle sales will continue to accelerate in China, and then, as the pandemic, if it unfortunately kind of returns to Asia, same dynamic will happen. So we see continued investment in those programs, and in a shift from to the EV platforms. The other thing that we're going to see in the administration, I think there's a couple things that could happen, particularly relevant for the EVs. The first one is on the regulatory side, and I think the litigation between the Department of Justice and the state of California will disappear pretty quickly. And a related sort of regulatory action there is, I think what we'll see is a one national CAFE standard emerge. I think the Biden administration will work closely with the closely with industry, as well as the states that have aligned themselves with California, and create a one national CAFE standard. And it'll probably be a return to a stricter standard. I don't know that we'll see the other states adopt California's elimination of the ICE by 2050. But I see the CAFE standards actually strengthening. The second thing is on the legislative side, and I think, to the extent, a lot of this will depend on kind of what the majorities are and what the votes end up being in the Senate and the House. But I think we're going to see incentive legislation. The amount and type of the incentive legislation will depend on what those majorities look like. A more democratically skewed majority in both the Senate and the House, I think will have a much more aggressive incentive legislation that would support EVs. The second piece of legislation then will be the infrastructure to accompany that. The big notion right now in EVs is all fast charging, which requires a much higher level kilowatt charging station than what is currently available. You're not talking 220 outlets anymore. I mean, you're talking 345s and 745s at a charging station, and that infrastructure is just non-existent right now. So, depending on the majorities that we have, I think you'll see some incentive legislation, but the aggressiveness and the magnitude of that incentive legislation will depend on the majorities in Congress. But I think we'll see an acceleration in the EV. Really, one other quick point. I saw a note that came from CAR. I think right now there's $200 billion of investments that are pending in the EV market, and it's not just manufacturing. There's a lot of investments that are pending on the R&D side as well. And I think where that investment ends up will be really kind of telling. General Motors is talking about hiring 3,000 engineers, all focused on engineering and a lot of the autonomous and EV initiatives that are out there. So it's not going to be just manufacturing. I think we're going to see continued investment, heavy investment on the R&D
very
side
good.
as
Thank
well.
you so much, Greg, and thank you so much, panelists, for attending this session today. And ladies and gentlemen, this probably concludes our panel discussion for advanced manufacturing. Obviously, if you have any additional questions, please feel free to send those through the chat function, and we'll be glad to have someone here on this panelist or group or someone from the team to go ahead and get you an answer to that question. But I hope you enjoy the rest of your conference, and I hope the rest of the day goes well for you. So again, panelists, thank you very much and have a great day.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Everybody. Blair, congratulations. You take care.